Hello everyone! Before watching this video, I would like to ask everyone to subscribe to this channel so you can stay up to date on any videos and content that I post here at Patrick's Crazy Place. These videos include my thoughts on professional wrestling, any updates I provide on my upcoming book, Godzilla the Monster Fight Record, Volumes 1 and 2, and what other random topic comes to my mind that I feel like talking about that day. Also, the description of this video includes a link to my other YouTube channel, The Weekday Warriors of Wrestling, which is a podcast that I do with co-host Eric Clancy. We just did our latest episode, so be sure to check that out. There will also be a link to my Twitter if you want to keep in touch with me and stay up to date on whatever it is I'm rambling about that day. So, with all of that said, enjoy the video. Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Heel or Face, where I examine the career of a specific professional wrestler and determine whether or not that talent was better as a heel or a face. And today's subject has got to be one of the toughest decisions that I've done thus far in this series. Today's subject is the excellence of execution himself, Bret the Hitman Hart. One of my top 5 favorite wrestlers of all time. When I think of people, and the term work rate gets thrown around, but when I think of the technical wrestlers, the real get down on the mat and put on a show with your sheer ability type of guys, Bret Hart might be one of, if not my personal favorite of all time. When you look at the technical aspects of professional wrestling, I think Bret Hart is, he was the excellence of execution. He was about as good as you could possibly be. And he was very good at, making every little thing in his matches matter and making his matches feel real for the most part. Bret was a true artist in every sense when it comes to performing as a professional wrestler. He wasn't the largest personality. He wasn't the best on the mic, which are all very important. But when it comes to the technical aspect of working in ring, there were few that were as good or better than Bret the Hitman Hart. I would put him in a very elite class in that regard, and I can go back and watch matches of his from decades ago, and even today I'm catching little things that he does in his matches, or I'm noticing little things that he does to make certain things matter. And I'll also say this, Bret is probably the best finish guy in the history of the business when you look at all the different big matches he had and coming up with all these creative finishes for those matches. Bret could come up with some of the best finishes imaginable. He was really a truly gifted artist in the world of professional wrestling. But does he work better as a heel or does he work better as a face? Now, on the surface, it should be a very easy answer. It's a babyface. Bret Hart was kind of like the perfect underdog superstar during most of his run. Again, he wasn't the big-time superhero like Hulk Hogan or the Ultimate Warrior, and he wasn't that crazy over-the-top personality like a Randy Savage, but he had this quiet confidence about him and an underdog appeal that made him fun to watch, even as a kid. And he may not be the mega draw that certain guys were, like Austin would be just a few short years after him, but he certainly had his appeal and almost always worked better in the babyface role, because that was his own in-ring style serviced the babyface role, or I should say the babyface role serviced his style better. And Bret was most known for being a big hero, and especially in his home country of Canada. That was always his appeal. He was always one of the most respectable talents in the world, no matter what wrestling company you looked at. So the only monkey wrench that gets thrown into the equation is 1997. What happened in 1997? Bret Hart turned heel, turned against the United States of America, formed the Hart Foundation faction, and had arguably the greatest run of his entire career. He was excellent as that top heel, anti-American character. Bret Hart played it to the hilt, and the whole crybaby angle where he felt like he had been repeatedly screwed, which really paid off in Survivor Series of '97, but we're not going to elaborate on that in this video. When you look at 1997 and Bret's run, I mean, that heel run was absolutely amazing, and Bret was never known for great promos. I think he got to a point when he was champion where he could be confident on the mic and say some interesting good things to sell his matches. But he was never a Hogan, he was never a Flair, he was never a Randy Savage or some, again, like a crazy over-the-top personality. And he wasn't like a Jake Roberts or a Mick Foley who could really command your attention on the stick. He was just always like a confident, at his best as a babyface, he was a confident talker that could get his point across. So good enough on the stick. As a heel, though, he cut some of the best promos of his career, hands down. He was amazing. And could really get the American fans to hate his guts with the things he was saying, which made him a perfect opponent for the likes of Shawn Michaels and especially Stone Cold Steve Austin, which resulted in them having arguably the greatest match of all time at WrestleMania 13, that famous submission match, which facilitated Bret's heel turn and best double turn of all time, by the way. And all of that worked great, and when you look at how hot that Hart Foundation angle got and that anti-American angle got right at the time when WWF was like finding that spark and getting hot and the television was becoming way more exciting, Bret was the perfect guy. Much to my surprise, he turned out to be the perfect guy to kind of help be the villain for Stone Cold Steve Austin to feud with and to give him a faction to go up against. And again, 1997 was the year where WWF kind of got their groove back. And, you started seeing things like D-Generation X and Sable taking her top off and Stone Cold Steve Austin flipping everybody off and cursing at people. It was the Attitude Era had officially begun, and Bret definitely found his place there. And really it was indicative of what the era was all about, where the cookie-cutter good guys, the Hogans, the Bret Harts, the role model types got booed, and characters that embodied things that were traditionally associated with heels, like the Stone Cold Steve Austins of the world, were getting cheered. And that was culturally what was going on at the time. And Bret switched roles without really changing all that much, really just changing how he spoke. But as far as his in-ring style, he was still basically the same. His look, basically the same. His theme song, exactly the same. But it ended up working exceptionally well. And, part of me thinks that, maybe this was the only way that a Bret Hart could work in the Attitude Era, because what he had been doing previously worked for the New Generation Era, and it worked when he was Intercontinental Champion at kind of the tail end of the Hogan Era. But in this new Attitude Era, where the audience and the personality and what they desired had completely changed, this was Bret's way of fitting into that mold. Kind of like how I've talked about it before with Sting, but Surfer Sting was not going to work in this new NWO era. So he had to change, and he did, and he ended up having the greatest run of his career until Starrcade 97. Whole other discussion. Don't need to get into that. But Bret changed with the times with this run, and I think it worked out beautifully, resulting in some of the most exciting stuff that WWE has ever done. I mentioned the submission match. I loved Bret's matches with The Undertaker during this time. Their SummerSlam match, I think, is fantastic, and their one-night-only match is great as well. And his stuff with Shawn Michaels was off-the-wall great because they hated each other in real life, and that came across on TV, which made it a lot more exciting because their hatred for each other felt real because it was real. And all of that was just absolutely stellar. So, to answer the question, does Bret work better as a heel or as a face? It's a very tough one to answer because most of his career he was a babyface and he was great at it. But that one run, that 1 year in '97, where he was one of the most hateable heels imaginable, it's like, I have a hard time easily saying, oh, Bret worked better as a babyface. But I think I found my caveat, and I think I found my answer. So, in 1997, when Bret went anti-American, and the American crowd hated his guts, and completely turned against a guy that before was a respectable underdog babyface champion hero, was now the most hated guy in the company, here's the thing. He only got that reaction in America. In Canada, he was a hero. Like, their ultimate hero. Go watch Canadian Stampede in your house, which many have said is the greatest in your house pay-per-view of all time. But that 10-man tag, that was like the Hart family's crowning night, that 10-man tag team match. And you would have thought that when the Harts won that match, you would have thought that like Canada just won all the gold medals in the Olympics. It was like a hero's victory parade. So Bret was like the most beloved Canadian wrestler in Canada. And then you look at how Bret was treated around the world. In Europe, he was even treated like a hero. Go watch I already mentioned it, but the Undertaker One Night Only match, that crowd was booing Undertaker. Which is not something, even at that time, was not something that happened often. But Bret was seen as like a hero around the world, except in America. I don't know what that says about America. It's like, yeah, fuck them. You know, around the world, Bret is beloved as a babyface, and they react to him like a babyface. But then in America, where he does most of his wrestling, he's absolutely hated and booed out of the building every night. A very unique and interesting crowd response to get for somebody. And it was, again, it just fed into the excitement of the time period and just made that character all the more interesting. But I'm going to say that Bret Hart worked better as a babyface, and during this run, he was technically only a heel in America. Around the rest of the world, he was still a babyface and one of the most beloved babyfaces. So during his greatest heel run, he was still technically a face to many, many, many fans around the world. So that helped ease me into answering this question. Bret Hart works better as a babyface. And, you know, again, when you look at the bulk of his career and the best work from his career, it was typically as a babyface. It's just that one run he had in 97 where he completely flipped the script that threw some, you know, difficulty in making a decision on this one. But it's still a fun thing to think through and talk about and look back on, because I love Bret Hart's career, especially in the WWF. WCW, we don't really talk about. Sans the metal plate incident with Goldberg, we don't really talk about any of that. But his run in WWF was absolutely outstanding, and I love reminiscing about the work that Bret Hart did, even during the down years, that post-Hogan era where numbers were down, times were rough. They had the ever-reliable Bret Hart to put on a good show and to have that hot program, whether it be his feud with his brother Owen or the stuff he did with Bulldog or his stuff with Backlund. I love that program with Backlund. I mean, WrestleMania 11, a match, you know, that match being terrible aside, I did love that feud in that program. His stuff with Diesel was great. Some of the best matches of Kevin Nash's career. Bret Hart was one of the most reliable talents and one of the most reliable guys that Vince ever had under contract and ever put the belt on. And Bret did his absolute best for the company and elevated his status to legendary status during that time because of just how hard he worked and how respectable he was. And that's the Bret Hart I always think of, was that guy. And, you know, what happened in 97 was great fun for everybody involved. Again, Survivor Series 97 probably soured a lot of it for Bret. But the run itself was a lot of fun. But when I think of Bret Hart for most of his career, I do think of him as a respectable underdog babyface, and because of that, I consider Bret Hart to be better as a babyface.